One of the biggest questions remaining in the Chicago Bulls offseason is one that can't really be answered until the season starts, and that's how this team will look together. But one thing you can't deny that the Bulls have done over this offseason is gotten considerably younger overall in their roster. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the Bulls' young core, and we're going to talk about where does it rank. Is this a season where the Bulls can actually prove that they maybe have one of the better young cores in the NBA? We're going to talk about that. Plus, we're going to dive into the mailbag. All that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Derek Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. So before we dive into the mailbag and we hear from you guys today, I wanted to talk about something. The Bulls' young core. And one thing that I've been seeing over the last 24 hours or so is a lot of Bulls content creators talking about the concept of trading Kobe White and or Ayo Dosunmu. And we're going to get into that a little bit at the end of this segment. But the thing that I want to talk about and ask is that how do you view the Chicago Bulls' young core? Now, I'll get into my thoughts on it, but leave that question in your head and please type it how you feel down below before and after as we go through this, things like this. We're not going to really be right now comparing it to the rest of the NBA, and that's mainly because the Chicago Bulls have tons of young players on this team that have promise, but still have to really show if they have something left in their game or how much more their game can still grow. When you look at it, by the end of the 2023-24 season, which was just last season, the Chicago Bulls had 5 players over the age of 30 and 7 total players if you look at over the age of 29. The Chicago Bulls right now on their roster, heading into next season, have 3 players on their roster over the age of 30 and only 5 over the age of 28. So the Bulls have gone considerably younger. And if you look at the players under the age of 25 on the Chicago Bulls, of course you have players that showed a lot last season that we kind of know what they're going to be, but they still have room to develop, absolutely, right? Kobe White, Ayo Dosunmu, both at 24. Those were players that were on this Bulls team last year, and we got to see their exact play on this Bulls roster and see how they fit together, which I really like the fit of Ayo Dosunmu and Kobe White together. I love how they have developed in the chemistry between those guys. And that really goes back dating to Ayo Dosunmu's rookie year when him and Kobe were both coming off the bench. In that time period, they developed a nice bit of chemistry there. It's not surprising that they still have that chemistry now today. But we're going now into a different era with the Chicago Bulls, with Josh Giddey being the starting point guard and Ayo Dosunmu being moved to the bench. He's going to be that first guard off the bench. He's going to play some minutes with both Josh Giddey and Kobe White, so we get to see how that develops. But when you look at those two players, we've seen what they can be, but we're still waiting to see how much more they can even extend on that, especially Kobe White now that he's going to be relied on even more offensively for the Chicago Bulls. But then you got the players, the rest of the players on this roster, right? When you look at players under 25, we got Matas Buzelis, who was our draft pick of last year at 19 years old. You know, the sky's the limit right now for Matas Buzelis. You have Matas Buzelis, who ESPN poll just talked about the rookies, and Matas Buzelis didn't actually fare all that too well in that conversation, which was a little bit surprising considering kind of the thought process and stuff around Buzelis, coming out of that draft, how he was, looked at as one of the players that, fell, that had the highest upside. He received, as far as the question of who will be the best draft pick, Buzelis got 0 votes. Who will be the NBA's Rookie of the Year? Buzelis got 0 votes. Who would be the draft's biggest steal? He got the 4th most votes in that poll. So it seems like people still do think that Buzelis can be a steal, but whether it's because of the Chicago Bulls, the role that he'll have, whatever, they don't necessarily look and view him as a player that is going to have the chance or the opportunity to be the Rookie of the Year or even be the best pick out of this draft. We'll see. It's a weak draft. It is what it is. But Matas Buzelis, at 19 years old, has tremendous upside for the Chicago Bulls. And I'd say right now, he probably has the most upside, unrealized upside of any player on the team, but that's just because he hasn't played in the NBA yet. Then you got Josh Giddey, the other player that we acquired at 21 years old. I'll tell you what, at 21 years old, there's not really many point guards that are even close to Josh Giddey in his atmosphere and what he's already been shown he's been able to do in the NBA. But because of finishing the season on a team in the OKC Thunder in which, he got less and less prioritized. Of course, they prioritized Shai Gilgeous-Alexander more, which should happen, mainly due to him being an MVP caliber player, right? But Josh Giddey has shown it. 17, 8, and 7. Basically, is what Josh Giddey's average when he had the ball in his hands. So him now coming to the Chicago Bulls, they are absolutely looking at him doing more, right? And really exceeding what he's done before. And then you have Patrick Williams at 22 years old, the guy, the enigma in Patrick Williams, the one that if you ask 10 Bulls fans, you're probably going to get 10 different answers on how they view and see Patrick Williams' upside in the NBA. And at this point, I get it. 4 years into the NBA, still talking upside. That's a red flag for a lot of people. But when you look at it, Patrick Williams is still younger than a handful of players drafted in the draft this year, right? And he's coming in with 4 years of NBA experience. And the thing that I've said it before is that a lot of Bulls fans herald and talk about players and appreciate players that have basically the same stat line as Patrick Williams. It just comes down to they show more energy out on the court. And the thing with Pat, and I've always said, right? I know not everybody's always said that, is it really comes down to Patrick Williams and him showing that fight, right? That fire. He hasn't really shown a whole hell of a lot of that. And so that leaves it much to be desired when it comes to Patrick Williams because he just hasn't shown like that edge that you want to see from players. Now, maybe that comes this year, but I think eventually you just got to realize guys kind of are who they are, right? And so the way that I look and view at Patrick Williams now, and I know not people are going to say it's copium or whatever, but like I don't even. It's not about him being the 4th overall pick anymore to me. It's about him coming in and being and taking advantage of the shots, allowing a player like Josh Giddey as the point guard to really kind of help grow his game some. Like Patrick Williams has a skill set that a lot of teams in the league love. He plays solid defense, and he's a really good three-point shooter. And that is enough for you to be able to contribute to a lot of NBA teams. And he does the three-point shooting consistently. He's actually gotten more and more consistent as a three-point shooter. He just has to be more aggressive. And that area, that flash that he showed in December of last season was a really good flash, but it just has to be more consistent. But again, Patrick Williams still another extremely young player under the age of 25 on this team. And then we got the players that are still really, really unproven. Dalen Terry at 22 years old. Julian Phillips at 20 years old, right? These are guys that we don't necessarily exactly know what they're going to be yet because they just haven't played a whole lot at the NBA level. Dalen Terry, the least played rookie at his draft position his rookie year, then came into last season and didn't play very much to start. He started playing a little bit more in spurts and things like that. He even had a really big game for the Chicago Bulls, one game in which he started. But overall, it just wasn't a lot. When you look at it, that game in which he played 27 minutes, he went 6 of 8 from the field, 1 of 2 from three-point range. He had 17 points, 8 assists, 2 blocks, 1 steal. And that's the potential of Dalen Terry. Not necessarily scoring 17 points, but just filling the stat sheet and being that type of player. Tell you what, you can use that type of player anywhere on your bench. And you got Julian Phillips, 20 years old, who was starting to play a lot more under Billy Donovan, but then got hurt, finished the season being hurt on the bench. And then Jalen Smith as well at 24 years old, even though he's been in the league for a while now. He's just a player who hasn't played a whole lot of minutes over the course of his NBA career, so there is still some left to uncover there. And then lastly on this list of players under 25 is Adama Sanogo, who we already know. We haven't seen really anything of at the NBA level, even though he had that 20-point game, which he looked great in, but that was kind of against garbage teams, but he's relegated mainly to the G League. So overall right now, the Bulls have solid young pieces, and when you look at it, all these guys are going to be contending for spots in their rotation, even over veterans like Torrey Craig, especially over Javon Carter, right? So to see when you have 8 young players, there's 8 young players that are actually on the roster, 9 if you count Adama Sanogo, the Bulls are hoping that, and when you hear things like the quote from Mark Eversley as far as not tanking, and they got young guys in here that they want to see what's going to happen, they're not necessarily aiming for the 6th seed or aiming for the play-in. They're trying to develop these guys. When you have young guys on your roster that are growing and developing, if you do miss out on a top 10 pick, which that would then go to the San Antonio Spurs, because the growth of these 8 players, 9 if you count Adama Sanogo, ends up pushing you over the top, right? And they end up, let's say you have 2 or 3 of these guys really develop this season for you. And Modest Bucilis, not going to say him developing in his rookie year, but he shows enough flashes and consistency over his rookie year to where you can see how he's going to fit in with these guys as well. The Bulls have a solid young core, but they have an unproven young core. And it's up to these players and also up to head coach Billy Donovan and his coaching staff to put them in the proper areas to grow and develop. But if we start seeing better growth from these young players, that's where it starts taking a different look on how we view this Chicago Bulls team. But again, it's up to them to prove that. And we'll see what happens. Now, as far as what I alluded to that we talked about at the end of this and talking about Kobe White and Ayo Dosunmu and the play and people asking if the Bulls should trade those guys, I go back to this. There are some legitimate questions on if Kobe White and Ayo Dosunmu, if this young core does not develop quickly within the next 2 years, will they age out of being with this core? And I'll say this, they become the veterans then that help guide and they help supplement what you have in your young players. Now, I'm not saying that if you get offered a great deal for these players that you don't necessarily bite at it. If you get two, this comes from my boy Jamal over at Bull Central, if you get two unprotected first round picks that look promising, you may have to consider it, right? But that's a considering. And are you going to get that value when you look at the guards around the NBA and how guards that we get a new crop of guards every year? The guards are almost becoming like running backs in the NBA, not as undervalued, but in the sense that yeah, you get your and you develop your guy, you keep them, but there's always young guards coming up in the league that can contribute in some shape, form, or fashion. I don't subscribe to the thought process of we just need to get rid of Ayo and Kobe because they're not star level players or superstars or whatever it is. No, they're 24 years old and they have really decent contracts. And they're even if they do max out on you, let's say they play so well that you consider giving them the max at the end of these 2 years. At that point, you still have a young core outside of Josh Giddey, right? Patrick Williams has got his money. That's not crazy money either. That you consider keeping those guys. So we'll see what happens there. I just don't like the thought process. Like you want to develop and you keep your guys. If you want to keep developing for guys to go elsewhere and contribute to other teams, what are we doing here? Right? What are we doing here? Eventually, you got to pay somebody. And so we'll see what happens there. But I'm not one that subscribes to those thoughts. I like this young core. And I think you want to keep that together to see how it's going to develop because that's what eventually can get you where you need to go. But all right, it's Saturday. That means it's Mailbag Day here at Chicago Bulls Central. Let's go ahead and get into these voicemails today. This one's from Shay.
What's up, Hayes? Look, I know this is a Bears playing, but you said you offer my Bulls take on this one since I can't call it into that number. And I was thinking, remember back in the 2013-14 season when the Toronto Raptors traded Rudy Gobert to the Sacramento Kings, and he was supposed to be their franchise, not one of their main pieces, and then they ended up getting better. Now I know what people are going to say. Shay, what does that have to do with us? But maybe that could be us this season. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're trading away DeMar DeRozan and trying to trade away Vucevic and Zach LaVine. Maybe we could be at the 2013-14 Toronto Raptors. You know, a lot of people thinking that trading away those two pieces in DeMar DeRozan and Alex Caruso can end up hurting us. But maybe we could probably sneak up on teams, and this could be a start of something that could possibly go well. And on top of that, we have a lot of people that are trying to prove themselves. And I think that that's what AK is trying to go for when he says that we're not trying to tank. And the first thing that popped up in my mind was the Toronto Raptors back in the 2013-14 season, back when they traded Rudy Gay, and for a bunch of like role players like John Salmons and like Patrick Patterson and Chuck Hayes, but they ended up getting much better after doing that trade. And a lot of people said that the Sacramento Kings came out the winner due to the fact that they had a young Rudy Gay at that time. But hey, I could be wrong, but I think that that's what AK is really trying to do, not necessarily rebuilding. Anyway, tell me what you think. Peace.
All right, so Raptors shading Rudy Gay. You started off by saying Rudy Gobert. Then, and the second time you said it, you said Rudy Gay. Come on, tighten up, Shay. No, I'm just playing. Shout out to Shay, who hasn't been able to leave a voicemail for a while. But you know, the thing with this is that I get what you're comparing to, and yeah, I mean, when you trade a player and your ultimate thing is a lot of us as fans, we go to thinking, all right, did we get somebody of equal value back? And that's not necessarily always the thing that you're trying to do. You may move on a player, like for example, the Bulls moved on for DeMar DeRozan just because he didn't fit the direct. They truly felt and they couldn't get to a level of competition in this area, and that's what I've been saying a while for DeMar DeRozan. The Bulls they are not going to get to a place of being able to compete in the time frame that it makes sense to pay DeMar DeRozan, a player over 33, out that amount and at this time. We just aren't going to get there realistically. And so once we traded for Josh Giddey as well, like the writing was on the wall. You can't have Josh Giddey and DeMar DeRozan on the same. You already try to force feed it with having DeMar and Vooch on the same team where they like to generate and start their offense from the same spots. You mean you want to have Josh Giddey and DeMar DeRozan, two very ball dominant? No, the writing was on the wall when that happened. The Bulls made the right decision. Now the question is how much does the opportunity that is now going to bring to other players? How much does that get you where you need to be, right? So we got to see how that's going to come about, and hopefully we are that team that we look back and we say, listen, no slight to DeMar, but that trade of DeMar DeRozan opened up these opportunities for these other players now to come in and be able to really, show and round out their game and show what they have, and we can develop those guys. But all right, let's get into the next voicemail. This one's from Joe.
Yo, hey, this is Joe the Blacksmith. First off, I just want to say, man, like what you're doing and how you decipher information and stats and the eye test and all that, and then utilizing kind of the hive mind of the channel with all the viewers and the ideas, and, people bringing their thoughts for better or for worse, and you decipher it. I feel like it all comes together as this really, really useful package for all of us, man, and I think it's kind of got a unique thing going that way. Anyway, a unique thing that's making us all better fans, man, who have a lot more to go off of with our analysis. But anyway, man, I'm still just thinking about this Giddey-Caruso trade, and the longer it sinks in, the more time passes. I see Giddey's performance in the Olympics and all that. Like, man, at first, I was bummed seeing Caruso go, man. I was one of those guys that was just like, Caruso's like franchise player. Just keeping him on the team, like, until he's old and he's way deep on the bench and he's like become a coach in some capacity, But the trade happened. It's like, well, okay, we got a 21-year-old point guard, probably one of the most, easily one of the most promising point guards in the league at that age. Like, I don't even know if there's a close second in terms of point guards under 21. And that's kind of hard to beat. And he brings offensive IQ, which, win or lose, man, watching the Bulls not play with intelligence offensively has been frustrating. It's been like a running theme for a really long time. Lonzo gave us, half a season where it felt like that wasn't such an issue, but man, that's about it. And, Kobe White, his point guard skills improved a lot, but, I don't think that's maybe his most natural position, maybe a combo guard. But anyway, Giddey taking over that position, 21 years old. He's going to be getting better. For at least, the next 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, he's going to be improving as a point guard with intelligence and playmaking. His passing's not going to decline at the age, His shooting's going to get better. If it doesn't, I think that'd be kind of shocking. Defensively, yeah, okay. Everybody's got a weak point. Maybe that won't get that much better, but maybe it will. He's 21 years old. And while he's getting better, Caruso's going to be retired while he's still improving. Caruso is, maybe he's at his peak right now, if not already. All right, I was cut off because I was rambling for a bit longer than I probably should have. But to sum it up, man, we got a point guard that, has a long time to improve and has already shown flashes of greatness at a very young age. And we traded off a player that has peaked, really, physically, I don't know if he's going to make, how well is he going to last in the playoffs, Caruso, on the Thunder, physically? How's he going to hold? I'm worried about that for them, because I do want to see them succeed, but I just don't have confidence. Unless they can find that bubble wrap Stacey King was talking about, he can play with that. He's going to have trouble making that, keeping his health all the way through the finals if they do make it that far. Anyway, those are my thoughts. What do you think? You've talked about this a lot already, but maybe you have something you can go off with that. All right, man. Take care.
Thank you for that. Like I said, I when I decided to create this channel, I had the mindset of I wanted to be a one-stop shop. That's why I dropped the new breaking news episodes when it's any type of news, right? Like we're talking about G League signings. I'm doing breaking news videos too, because I really want anybody who comes to Chicago Bulls Central, not only my takes, but I want you to be able to feel like you are informed on what this team is doing, because the national media isn't always going to cover us, right? Now, if the Bulls get back to being good, or a great team, the national media will cover us very well in detail. But until then, people like me and Jamal and Tony with Bulls Nation Station, the Shy Bulls podcast with the Cognac Boys, right? Pat the designer with what he does over there, like we follow this team in and out, day and day, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. And I think that that's a different level of appreciation for when you get that. And so that's really what I try to do here. So I'm glad that that the people are loving it. Now, as far as liking the Josh Giddey trade more and more, yeah, I agree. One of the hardest things for fans to do, right, if they're being honest, is to evaluate stuff that's not on the stat sheet. And very often we look at what's on the stat sheet, especially last, or we look at the narratives because whatever, and we let that form our opinion. And that's something I just don't do. Like I said it, like once Josh Giddey was traded here to the Chicago Bulls, I made it my mission this offseason to become as acquainted with Josh Giddey's game as what I can. Watching him internationally, going back and watching his tape, not just highlights, the actual tape. The difference. Need more fans to stop thinking that by watching highlights you're watching tape. Watch actual tape. Nonetheless, though. And so the in-between, the things that aren't on the stat sheet are hardest things to quantify for a player that hasn't been on your team. When that player is on your team, you appreciate those in-between areas a little bit more because you've seen him play day to day. And Josh Giddey is a player that, yeah, there's stats, right, as far as the 2022-23 season, the stats are there. But then outside of that, like, you got to see how this guy's understanding of the game of basketball is, and he can absolutely make the players around him much better. That is the type of player. Like, I read an article before, and they compared him to Jason Kidd, saying that he's going to be one of those players that has to find a way to be effective without necessarily shooting the ball the most effectively. And while I don't compare him to Jason Kidd as far as the caliber of player, not yet, right, I can understand where that's coming from. Like, Josh Giddey is a good basketball player. And despite of how his season or playoffs ended for the OKC Thunder, he's a good basketball player. Now, the question that we have to ask ourselves is how good is he going to be able to be here with the Chicago Bulls? And that's something that we'll have to see over time. But all right. Thank you for leaving that voicemail, Joe, man. I appreciate you so much, brother. Let's get into this next voicemail. This one's from Brian Washington.
Hey, what's up, Hayes? I was watching the show again. This is Brian Washington from the West Side. Yeah, man, I'm glad they not tanking. I don't want to see no tanking shit. We've been watching tanking since Derrick Rose left. You know what I'm saying? It ain't like we've been having the past few years great seasons. So I don't want to see no tanking. I'm glad they not tanking. I don't care about no top 10 draft pick next year. You probably got a top 10 player on your team already. You just don't fucking play them. You know what I'm saying? We don't know what we have. We don't play the players. You got young guys in the G League that probably could play better than the players on the team now. They don't play them. They don't give them a chance. So I'm with this. Like I said in the last message, I'm with this. Even with Levine on the team, even with Vooch, like, let's not just give everything away. You know what I'm saying? We got rid of our favorites. You know what I'm saying? The guy that you know that led the team. You know, that hustled, that played real hard, our style of basketball. So, no, I don't want to see no tanking, man. I don't care about no draft pick next year. See what you got on this team right now. I like the players we got. If he's a better player, go and bring him on the team this year. I don't care about next year. We're trying to see what's going on with this team you put together right now since you made all the moves. But I don't want to see no tanking. I don't want to watch that shit, man. I don't care about no draft pick. I'd rather I'd rather bring Drummond and Caruso and them back, goddamn, before I watch a tanking team. I'd rather watch DeRozan just do his thing. I'd rather watch another play-in season than a fucking tanking season. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to watch that shit, bro. Let's see red, goddamn. Let's see it now. Start now. Some new blood.
All right, a little bit of the exaggeration there was a little bit crazy, my boy. I'm not even going to lie to you. Like saying that we could have a top 10 player, we just don't play. We play our players. And to say that we could have somebody in the G League, we ain't got nobody in the G League who's going to be top 10. When you really look at it, like, I get it. It opens up opportunities, right? The moving on from DeMar and not tanking, and what that affords you to be able to really evaluate these players is what the Bulls are doing. With Mark Eversley's comments on that we're not necessarily aiming for whatever, but we're trying to we have a group of young guys that we believe in, that we think are good, that have shown some promise. You want to develop those guys. You want to see how much of that raw potential that they have or had, how much of that can you untap here on your team by really taking them off the leash. And that's what you want to see this season. So tanking is one of those things where nobody wants to see a tank, right? Nobody wants to see that. No, the Bulls have not been tanking since Derrick Rose era. But the thing is, nobody wants to see a tank. but sometimes being bad. And I think that that's the difference. Like, yeah, you want to see these players and they're going to play, but that doesn't mean we're going to be good. But we're not tanking, right? So even if the Bulls do end up winning 25 games this season, it wouldn't be because they're tanking. It would be because, hey, we just ain't that good of a team. So, yeah, nobody wants to see a tank, but we want the results of improving this team. And sometimes, you can't just forego the draft either. You got to kind of look at that. That's why outside of this pick that they owe to the San Antonio Spurs, the Bulls have to draft well over the next handful of years to really help add to that ceiling and that depth of what you're trying to develop here in Chicago. And let's hope that they can do that. Now, so that's kind of my thought process there. Very great voicemail, Brian Washington. Thank you for leaving that. Let's go ahead and get into this next one. This one's from Pharaoh.
Hey, man, appreciate the content like always, man. This is Pharaoh. Just got a few things to say and finish my point that I left off from the last voicemail. You know, just going back to you know, us getting a superstar or our top 10 player. Everything you said about that, yes, I agree. Just to clarify myself, I absolutely 100% agree that we need a foundation for our team to even look attractive for those top 10 players to even want to join us. And I can tell you this right now, our team is not going to look attractive to any superstar or any top 10 player until we get rid of Zach LaVine. Now, I'm not saying Zach LaVine's a bum. Like, listen, Zach LaVine and Lonzo Ball are my favorite players on the Bulls right now. I love watching their game. But I'm just trying to be as realistic as possible, and I just don't see our team going that deep or getting another top 10 player in our team with Zach LaVine on our roster. It's just, I'm not saying he's a bum. I'm just saying that we don't know how healthy it is, which is, I honestly believe the reason why we couldn't get rid of him is because that's the same question all these other coaches are thinking. Yeah, he's great. He's a good, you know, he's a player that can fit in a lot of systems, but how long can he play? You know, can he play at least 80% of the season and stay healthy in the playoffs? We don't know, and he's too expensive to find out about that. So that's how I'm feeling about Zach LaVine right now. We can't get that type of player until we get rid of him. Now, if he buys into our system, Zach LaVine can actually play into how we feel that he can actually be. You know, he can play to that contract. Zach LaVine has one of the most purest shooting forms ever. I really think he can play like a Kevin Durant type of role to flourish, right? Not to say that he can go out and get his own bucket, but kind of like that, you know, you can place him in any system and he can be effective easily. His catch and shooting form is immaculate, and he can slash and finish very well at the basket, right? And placing Josh Giddey with them, oh yeah, I'm excited to see how that actually works out for the Bulls. You know, I hate to, everybody likes to sugarcoat it, but him and DeMar DeRozan, yes, they're buddies, I guess, but that just wasn't working out. Both of them needed to be basically the guy, the scorers of the team. That's just not going to work in the Philly Donovan system. So yeah, Lonzo Ball, like I said before, Lonzo, what I believe in his comeback story. I want him to have the best comeback story in NBA history, just on a different team. Like I said, that's my favorite player in the Bulls right now. But yes, let's say he does have a breakout season and he's like the player that he was before he got injured. Yeah, that's not going to really, my question about that is, can he stay that player 3 years down the road? 2 injuries that are supposed to be career-ending injuries, I can't trust that. So let's raise his stock value and get rid of him so we can not be trapped with that again. But anyways, man, I just wanted to see what you thought about that, Hayes.
All right, see, this is part of the thing. Like, to say that is Zach LaVine going to, like, Zach LaVine has played in 75% of the games since he's been drafted to the Chicago Bulls. And if you take away last season, in which he only played with 20-something games, which was the most games he's missed, he's played in well over 80% of the games that he's had available. But there have been a lot of games in that as well where he's played injured. Now, I do think that, or played hurt, and I do think that that contributes as well to how Zach LaVine's kind of viewed, because he doesn't always play the best. He played with his thumb, right? They played so much with that thumb that eventually it kind of healed itself, right? And his shooting was questionable after that. He had a really good season. Then the foot thing or the ankle thing, I think, the knee thing that happened at one point in time as well. Like, Zach LaVine has played through a lot of injury. This whole thing of Zach LaVine, we don't know if he's going to be on the court or not. No, Zach LaVine is on the court way more than he's off the court. And I think sometimes the narrative around that has made it seem like it's other than that, and it's just not. He's been on the court more than he's been off. Now, as far as the Lonzo Ball, I agree with you. Even somebody in the comments yesterday was like, oh, the fact that a fully healthy Lonzo, you think is not as good as Josh Giddey. It's like, you got to understand what fully healthy means. If Lonzo's fully healthy coming into the season, that doesn't mean he's right back to the player that he was. That means that he's healthy and able to play basketball. He's still not playing back-to-backs. He says his body still got to acclimate to being back in the NBA after being out of it for 3 years. And I don't care who you are. There's nobody, not one single player that you can simulate enough in workouts and things like that of NBA ball playing. It takes a lot to get back to NBA level, especially when being out that long. So yeah, it sucks that our backcourt that was and looked at as a backcourt that if they would have been able to stay healthy and play in their prime, man, that would have been a great backcourt to watch. I truly believe how they would have developed after that first half season together. But this is where we are now. And so the Bulls got to move on. I don't know if I agree with you. Like, at the end of the day, the Bulls are looking to move on from Zach. They're going to move on from Zach the moment that they get an opportunity to. But I don't think any top 10 players coming to the Chicago Bulls, and it's not just because of Zach LaVine. It's because we haven't shown that we have a core. If we show that we have a core that any top 10 player looks at and say, by me joining that team, I have the best chance to win a title, whether Zach is on that team or not, they'd come. That's what the Bulls have to do, and hopefully they develop that guy internally so you don't have to go out and pay for him and try to recruit him, but you have a guy that can develop into that on your roster. That's the ultimate goal. We'll see if the Bulls can get into it. But great voicemail there, Pharaoh. That's my time for today, guys. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. BullsCentralPod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. That's thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.